So today we're going to talk about TFC in the Moving Forward series episode, and if there is an example of money can't always buy you success in MLS and only spending on attack but not actually even focus on the defensive end also doesn't buy you success in MLS, this is a perfect example for TFC because this season, I've talked about it coming into this year as much as, yes, they have spent a lot on the attack, and yes, they were definitely waiting for the likes of Insigne and then later Bernadeschi joining this team and really create a second half resurgence to get this team in the playoffs. At the end of the day, the biggest Achilles heel and the biggest factor that could actually get this team not where they are heading into this year and missing the playoffs once again is the defense. And it's not a big surprise that ultimately was the ultimate culprit in this one. In fact, if I was going to do a relatively short moving forward series episode about TFC and not go too much in the detail, I'll just basically say, well, the reason why TFC missed the playoffs is because defense and goalkeeping. And that's basically simple as that. But obviously, I'm not going to do that. I want to kind of talk about what happened this season for this team, which they finished the season. Well, actually, they didn't finish this record. This is still the current record that they had because we still have 2 games left. But with 2 games left, they have a 9-7-16 record and have 34 points. They scored 49 goals, and again, just like what I talked about the San Jose Earthquakes in the Moving Forward series episode, the attack was not the issue of why they are near the bottom of their respectable conference. In fact, the offense was anything but a problem for this team, especially when both Bernadeschi and Insigne come to this team, where this team was just one of the most lethal attacking team in the league. But the problem is the defense, 61 goals given up, one of the most in the Eastern Conference. I believe only DC have gave up more goals than what TFC has done this season. And their goal differential is -12. And I remember last year, didn't they give up like 66 goals or 67 goals last season? They're approaching that mark again. And it just, again, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot throughout this video, that defense was the ultimate downfall of why this team weren't able to live up to its potential, despite the fact that they spent heavy investment in the squad. Now, they're currently 13th in the Eastern Conference, but there was a time where, they were definitely in the playoff hunt, especially with the fact that they kind of went on a bit of a second half resurgence, and it looked like maybe they were going to sneak into the playoffs, and looked like that was going to be the team that maybe no one want to face when the playoff time, of course, does happen. And obviously that, of course, hasn't worked out, with them kind of collapsing in the latter part of the stretch. And I think also you can say that one of the reasons that maybe is the downfall for this team is that they just didn't able to win those crucial playoff 6-pointer down the stretch. Now, top goal scorer for the season, believe it or not, it's not Bernadeschi or Insigne. As much as maybe people think that of course is the case, it's actually Jesus Jimenez, the top goal scorer for this team with 9 goals, followed by Jonathan Osorio also with 9 goals. I mean, Jesus Jimenez, for the beginning of the season, I remember he started red hot with this team. I even talked about how this was a guy that I think was being very underrated and kind of flying under the radar, because not a lot of people talk about how he was kind of averaging a goal for TFC, and then he went through that very long dry spell during the after he gone on that hot start. And I think that maybe is kind of the reason why not a lot of people have talked about him. I mean, for a striker, for a guy that kind of go on a hot streak and kind of go for a cold streak, and in some ways he's kind of had a very typical goal striker kind of season, where if you're a number 9 and you want to be known as one of the best number 9, you need to, of course, keep your streak going. But more times than not, we have not seen that happen, and that when your number 9 start to go for a goal drought, then it can be very hard to get out of. And for Jesus Jimenez, he had a really tough time trying to get out of that goal streak, and getting to a point where he only scored 9 goals this season, followed by Jonathan Osorio, who was, again, contribute once again on the goal score. That's been one of the thing that he's been able to do, which is, again, it's kind of odd that is the case, because he's more of a deep line midfielder for this TFC team. So the fact that he's still able to reach up into the top goal score chart just shows you how he is definitely a guy that can score some crucial goal for this team. And then, of course, at number 3, we got Federico Bernadeschi with 8 goals, followed by Insigne with 6 goals, and then Alejandro Pozuelo, who's no longer with this team, finished with 4 goals for TFC. Now, top assist leader, again, the importance of Jonathan Osorio was definitely there. Well, actually, you know how I said he was a deep line kind of midfielder? That technically isn't true. I think he's kind of more of a number 8 than what I think he's like a number 6 on a deep line midfielder would be. But he's definitely one of the better one, especially contributing on the attack, because he finished as the top assist leader with 6 assists, followed by Michael Bradley with 5 assists. Then you got Alejandro Pozuelo with 5 assists, Lucas Petrasio with 4 assists, and then Federico Bernardeschi with 3 assists to round up the top 5 for this TFC team. Now, the highlights for this TFC team, again, obviously one thing that is kind of forgotten about this team this season, and this could be such an easy thing to forget, is that they actually won a trophy. I mean, it's hard to believe that, out of all the trophies that's been won so far this season in MLS, I think this one is probably the one that will be forgotten the most, and the fact that they actually won the long-awaited Canadian Championship in 2022, and the long-awaited Canadian Championship isn't this year's edition. This year's edition, they actually lost to, I believe they lost, didn't they lose to Montreal in there? No, I think they lost to Vancouver. Yeah, they lost to Vancouver in the final. This was the 2020 version, where, remember, that was the version we thought that for a long time. It looks like that was canceled because of how it is, but it turns out that the Canadian Soccer Association said, no, we never canceled it. We just kind of delayed at a time where it just gets to a point where it's 2 years later and then they're still playing it. And it kind of caught a lot of people off guard, like, wait, they're playing the Canadian Championship in 2022? That is the 2020 edition? I thought that one was canceled a long time ago. But nevertheless, they did win that over Forge FC. Though, again, it wasn't kind of convincing because they did win it in a PK shootout, and Forge definitely gave TFC all they can handle. I mean, imagine if Forge actually beat TFC in that Canadian Championship. Then, oh boy, then it's going to be hard to come up with highlights with this team, because again, there was not a lot of highlights you can say that TFC has had this season. But again, winning a trophy, I don't care how bad a team season is, that is definitely going to be considered a highlights of a year, even if it's just going to be the Canadian Championship, and one that really doesn't mean much other than the fact that you, of course, won another Canadian Championship trophy, and add to the record amount of Canadian Championship trophy that TFC had won in their franchise history. And then, of course, after Insigne and Benedeschi arrival, this team kind of went on a second half resurgence. Again, we were talking about it, the fact that, once both of those Italian star-studded striker comes into this team, we were thinking that, yeah, they were going to go on a run. They were going to go on a Seattle Sounders-esque kind of second half resurgent. And actually, I'm not sure why I wrote insurgent. I actually meant resurgent there. I wrote the wrong word here. Let me just fix that. Yeah. So yeah, they went on a second half resurgent. They went on a 5-game unbeaten run to a point where, again, they were getting close in terms of being going above the red line, and that, yeah, I mean this is where the discussion is. Well, it looks like this might be the team that no one wants to face, because you do not want to face a TFC side, especially a Bob Bradley TFC side that has a lot of good attacking talent. Even though the defense was still a big question, and watching how TFC was playing, it kind of feel a little bit like the LAFC back in 2019, where this team is all about the attack. And those high-end talent on the attack will basically kind of overshadow the major issue that this team on the defensive end and also on the goalkeeping. But unfortunately, that was not the case, because, like I said before, throughout this video, that problem that they had at the back end in the goalkeeping position was the reason why this team basically went on a sinking ship, especially in the beginning and also near the end of the season. And oh, by the way, also, if you're watching this video and you're making a drinking game of how many times I mentioned defensive problem for TFC, don't do that. I am not responsible in terms of someone potentially end up in the hospital or even potentially die because of it, because of how many times will mention it. But I'll mention it again. Again, the defense, as predicted, was holding this team back. I said it during the beginning of the season. I mean, even though I know they of course did acquire some defensive help, I know that they of course got Carlos Salcedo, and they made him a DP signing, which I'll of course talk about that in just a bit, and how it went for this team. I just feel like they still need some serious defensive help, and in some way they were kind of just almost fielding the same back line as last season, and it was not a big surprise that basically when you decided to not fix your defense, that was an obvious issue this offseason. It was going to hold this team back, and boy, it definitely hold this team back, because there was time especially in the first half of the season, where this team was an absolute mess on the defensive end. Like, they just don't know how to defend at time, and they were shipping goals at a rate was very similar to last season, and that's what a lot of people are kind of saying, that even if they do get the likes of Insigne and then later Bernardeschi into this team, and they made the attack to look like almost similar to what Bob Bradley wants when he was coaching with LAFC, that defensive kind of issue is going to hold this team back. And again, for a while it looked like that wasn't going to be the case, but it definitely was the case in the latter part of the season, where those defensive issue once again popped up, and the goalkeeping issue also popped up, which again, that brings us to the second part, where goalkeeping was also a big issue. And this is something that I think I've also probably should have mentioned it in the beginning of the season when I did a preview of this team, of the fact that they definitely don't have an answer in terms of who is the right goalkeeper. Is it Alex Bono? Is it Quentin Westberg? Well, I think after this season, the answer is probably neither, because neither really play well. It doesn't matter if you put Bono in goal or Westberg in goal. Neither of them really kind of succeeds, and it's kind of sad to see that both goalkeeping have really dropped in terms of their quality. Because I remember Bono during the time when he was part of that TFC team that went on deep run, he was definitely one of the most underrated goalkeeper in the league, and the same goes with Quentin Westberg. I remember the 2019 run; he was definitely very decent. So to just show both of those goalkeeper that it's hard to believe they were part of that dynasty kind of run. Well, actually, I wouldn't say dynasty, because I think putting the D word in terms of TFC good run during 2016 all the way to 2019, despite only winning like one MLS Cup, might be a little bit of a stretch, but it was definitely the best run that this team has ever had in their franchise history, and both of those goalkeepers were part of it. And the fact that they have dropped so much in terms of the quality that they had is kind of stunning, and it's just getting to a point where that was something that was also holding them back, because there was time where I have mentioned so many times where either of those goalkeeper could have done better in terms of saving shots, and that when you have a bad defense and also have a bad goalkeeping situation, it's no wonder why you're shipping 61 goals this season, and no wonder why you are one of the worst defensive team in the Eastern Conference and in the league in general. And then lastly, the road woes, and also dropping crucial points at home, especially in the latter part of the season. Like, we knew that this team was really struggling on the road. This was one of the last teams to be able to get a road victory. But, when you, of course, struggle on the road, that also means that you need to pick up points at home. And I think this also goes back to the latter part of the season, where they have those games at home. They weren't able to get those crucial home points and get those playoff 6-pointer. And hence, that's why that second half resurgence that looked like it was on, it eventually kind of stall out in a way where they just never were able to keep pace in terms of the teams in the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. I mean, don't get me wrong. In the Eastern Conference, just like the West, there were a lot of teams that was dropping points and kind of keeping the pace and keeping the amount of points to get into the playoffs a little bit lower than what I expected. But it kind of doesn't help the fact that TFC was definitely dropping a lot of points every week, and you can only, even if teams are kind of helping them in a way, if you drop way too many points like what TFC had done in the latter part of the season, you're not going to keep pace in terms of that. Now, in terms of the biggest win this season, I mean, it should be no discussion. It has to be that 4-0 victory they had against Charlotte FC. That was the Bernardeschi and Insigne game, as both of them making a debut and kind of just announced themselves in MLS. Like, both of them were crucial goal scoring and assist maker in that team, and that was kind of something special that we thought we were going to see with TFC. And that was kind of the game where we kind of said that that looked like the old TFC from the 2016 all the way to the 2019 run, and we thought we were going to get that. Obviously, unfortunately, we didn't see more of that, and that even though that wasn't the case, I think at least TFC fan can reminisce that kind of game, and that was by far the best game that TFC have played probably since when they were the dominant force in the league a couple of years ago. But the biggest loss this season, it has to be that 4-2 loss against Atlanta United on the road. I mean, I mentioned that, talk about playoff 6-pointer. This was probably the biggest playoff 6-pointer. Like, they already lost the previous week against Montreal, and their chances to make the playoffs was already kind of hanging on a balance. But this was the death blow. This was the game I talked about, how both of these teams was just barely hanging on and having fringe playoff hope. The loser of that game most likely will have their playoff hope ended, and I think that was the one that kind of ended their chance, and therefore I think that is definitely the biggest loss for TFC this season. Now, in terms of average attendance, 25,280, which is actually good for fifth in the league. You know, TFC has always averaged some of the best crowd in the league, and again, that gives a lot of credit to the fan base here. They definitely have a very strong fan base, but also it kind of helps when they are in a big market, and not to mention, pretty much most of the games in the second half of the season at BMO Field was sold out because of the way that, you know, the Insigne and Benedeschi hype was definitely through the roof. Now, in terms of revelation, again, you know, could either go with both Benedeschi or Insigne, but I'm going to go with Benedeschi because I think his number is just slightly better than Insigne. I mean, Insigne definitely do score some crucial goal, but I think Benedeschi, in terms of his overall present, was definitely a big thing. I will also maybe give a shout out to Jonathan Osorio too. Again, this guy, he is an absolute workhorse, and that I'll also talk about in just a bit of how they got a big decision that they're going to be making this offseason because of the fact that his contract is going to be expiring, and that TFC still have not announced of him extending their man, and really kind of just Mr. Toronto FC for the next couple of years. And you know, the reason why I say he's Mr. Toronto FC is because he's been with this team ever since he was in the youth academy for this TFC team. Now, the disappointment for this team, oh boy, there was definitely a lot of disappointment, and I definitely can go with a lot of players on the defensive end. But I gotta go with Carlos Salcedo. I mean, this is pretty much the most obvious answer, because you remember how I said when they decided to sign Carlos Salcedo and decided to send a DP kind of spot in order to get him, and how I've always mentioned when you decide to sign a defender and you use him as a designated player, yeah, that is kind of just going against what teams usually do, and going against common kind of practice nowadays in MLS, and especially kind of also broke one of the unwritten rules of the fact that you should not be spending your designated player kind of signing or goalkeeper and defender. And I even mentioned many times it's kind of like a cardinal sins that you committed, and yeah, TFC clearly commits this cardinal sins. But back then we didn't know that was the case, because again, you know, I feel like there was a case that maybe for TFC spending a DP signing on a defender was the right choice, because they had so many problems on the defense and last season, and that they hoped that maybe signing a well-known player and a player that have play with Tigres and was a regular starter for that team was going to solve the solution. Turns out that was not the case. In fact, he was absolutely dreadful with TFC, to a point where, you know, during his short spell, he was just so bad that eventually they had to bench him, and basically had to kind of send him back to Tigres because of how bad he was. So yeah, it's no doubt that has to be a huge disappointment, and I think that will definitely go down as one of the worst signing we'll ever see in league history, and probably the worst signing we'll see TFC ever made, because it's mind-blowing the fact that they spent a lot of money to get him, and they were hoping that he was going to be the leader on that defensive end, and it blowed up in their faces in a huge way. But moving forward for this TFC team, again, they need defensive help. I mean, I know it's kind of annoying for me to keep saying it over and over again, but they seriously need to do so, because this team, unless if they don't have some defensive help and they don't fix that back line, this team is not going anywhere and be a competitive team. They also need to figure out the goalkeeping position. Whether, you know, do you keep both Bono or Westberg, or do you just find a new goalkeeper? I think they need to find a new goalkeeper, because I think it's pretty much time where I think TFC might be moving on Westberg or Bono in that goalkeeping position, or maybe even both, in terms of letting them go. I think maybe one of them will let go, because I think you always want to have a good backup option, and I think both Bono and Westberg is a decent backup option, but obviously they're not good option in terms of being the starter of this team, and this is where they need to, of course, figure out in terms of who they will sign in terms of the goalkeeping position. And, like the defensive help that they need, whether if they want some defensive help within the league. I mean, there's definitely some good defenders I think are out of contract and could be in the free agency market. In the defensive area, I think Aaron Long could be a good example of it. I mean, I know he had an absolute stinker in that game against Japan for the U.S. men's national team, but for the most part, when he was with the Red Bulls this season, he's been pretty good and pretty solid on the defensive end. And then in the goalkeeping position, Sean Johnson is definitely the first name I can think of immediately that could be on the free agency market, considering NYCFC still not have re-signed their star-studded goalkeeper, despite the fact that he's going to be out of contract at the end of the season. So those are definitely two names that they can definitely sign this offseason in terms of the free agency market, or are they going to go in the international market too? And mind you, they already tried that once with Carlos Salcedo, and it blew up in their faces. So again, that's something that they definitely need to worry about, and that they need to definitely figure out in terms of trying to find another player that has been proven to do well and can solidify the defense. Because like I said, if they don't do that, then it's going to be a big problem this season for this team. And then, again, the last thing moving forward, and the big question I will say is, will they move on from Osorio, who, of course, will be a free agent this offseason? Now, Jonathan Osorio has been expressed that he is still keeping his dream alive in terms of making a move to Europe. Though, again, if he is going to be moving on and maybe go to Europe, this is really his last chance. Like, he is up that age where he's kind of almost near the tail end of his prime, and that if you want to make a move to go to Europe, usually you make it like during your mid-20s or even your early 20s, depending on how promising you have been playing in MLS and eventually shipping off to overseas. But in Jonathan Osorio cases, he has been proving years after years how important he is to this TFC team, and it's getting to a point where we'll see whether or not if this might be the last time we might see him with a TFC shirt. And it will be sad that is the case, because again, he is the guy that is the heart and soul of this team. He's been with this club for a very long time, the longest serving player on this club by a country mile, and this is a big decision that TFC will have to make, and even a bigger decision for Jonathan Osorio himself. Do he want to stay with TFC and kind of continue to become a legend for the team, or is he thinking about moving on to Europe and chase for his ultimate dream of potentially playing in Europe? But there you have it. That is pretty much it. My moving forward episode of Toronto FC. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, what do you think is the highlights, the lowlights, and also the revelation and disappointment in terms of players for TFC this season? And most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to fix what is this team going to fix in the offseason to trying to get themselves back to the promised land that they were a couple of years ago? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.